And one thing that we want to do here at HuffPost Live is make it not just about statistics and make sure that we focus on the economy in ways that bring the stories of real people who are being affected out and see what solutions there might be. One story that caught our eye is the plight of a California miniature horse farm called Lovepatch Farms. Its owner, Lee Romero, was supposed to be evicted last week. She joins us from Sonoma County. To put the story in perspective, Nelson Davis, small business expert and HuffPost blogger, and Roy Oppenheim, a foreclosure defense attorney. And on the phone also is Sharon Glidewell. She's a teacher who took her class on a field trip to Lovepatch Farms. Lee, can you just briefly tell us what your farm does and what's happening to it as things stand right now?
Yes, as of 2008, we ended up trying to get a loan modification from Chevy Chase Bank. We tried unsuccessfully for almost a year, and they kept saying that we had to come current before they would even talk to us. And our payments went from about $1,700 a month to $4,800 a month, basically overnight. We were definitely underwater. So we had some friends who were going to help us and perhaps see what they could do in terms of spurring some action into the loan modification. However, what ended up happening was they were able to negotiate a short sale and for $400,000 cash. And the buyer was also a broker, and he was a friend of the family who we had originally purchased thousands of dollars of miniature horses from when we first started our farm in '98.
And this is the person who now owns the farm?
This is the person who now owns the farm.
So just to get it straight, you had owned this farm. It's a miniature horse farm. Well, what was the purpose of the farm? What do you do with miniature horses?
Well, we've owned the farm for 30 years. And I have had horses for almost 40 years. And in '98, we took a drive through the country and saw these great little miniature horses, ended up stopping and ended up purchasing 5 horses. And from that, we grew the farm. At those times, horses were going between $2,500 to $10,000 per horse, depending on it was a mare or a stallion. And so we were in the business of breeding and selling. And the market started to disappear when we started the economic downturn. So in order to support ourselves, we started to do tours and educational presentations because we would have so many people walking by or driving by and stopping and seeing the horses, and they would ask us questions. And meanwhile, 2 hours later, we thought, if we're going to educate people and they are having so much fun seeing the little ones, let's go ahead and create a business out of it. So that is what we did.
Mm-hmm. And so when the financial crisis hit and the housing crisis hit, were you then underwater on the amount of money that you owed on the farm?
Yes. In 2008, our loan was $756,000. And with the short sale, Chevy Chase forgave $356,000, although the buyer broker said that he would purchase the property and then lease it back to us. And he did all that with the assurances that it would be a long-term investment, that it would be a win-win situation, and that we would get a yearly renewable lease.
And so just briefly, now what's happened clearly is that the farm's been short sold. You've got all these miniature horses. This is your entire life tied up in this thing. And all of a sudden you were expected to be evicted last Monday because you have no cash flow to pay the repayments.
No, we've been paying rent. We've been paying rent all along. They had made several adjustments to the rent because they did a remodel on our property, and because of that remodel, we could not host the tours. We had debris boxes and construction materials and all this and that, and we're primarily stroller, walker, and wheelchair friendly. We could not host our groups for 10 months.
Right. So But I just want to go to Sharon now. Sharon's on the phone, and Sharon, you've taken kids to Lovepatch. What's your impression of the experience of going to the farm?
Oh, our group was a mixed age group from ages 5 to 11, and we had a couple of senior adults with us, as well as a couple of, other younger adults. And it was very therapeutic. It was a rewarding educational experience. What's interesting is the instinct that God put in these horses. When we arrived and they brought out the first two minis, the horses were drawn to the two boys in the group that had the behavioral problems in the group, and they immediately were calmed and on their best behavior the whole time. So it engaged everyone from the oldest to the youngest. And, we're all anticipating, future visits.
So you're a bit disappointed that may not be able to happen?
Extremely.
Look, Nelson, I want to go to you because you obviously, when you write about small businesses in the United States, and when you blog for Huffington Post, clearly, I don't want this story to be just about this story. This is a story that is being replicated millions of times across America, whether it's in farms, whether it's in homes or whatever. There's no way that in 2005 or 2006, people who were making business decisions, small businesses who were projecting their expected income or the value of repayments on a property that they were expecting was going to increase, there's no way that they could foresee what was about to come down the pike in 2008. How are we handling this? How should we be handling this? How could Lovepatch Farms be handling this, at least in the hypothetical?
Well, small business or large business, everyone has to look at two things. A, is there a sustainable business model there where your income outstrips your outgo? And everyone has to look at reinventing themselves at some level and to some degree. They were horse breeders before. Now, this is a wonderful story that touches the heart, and there's so much empathy and willingness to try and help in this particular case, but underneath it all must be the business model. So if you're looking at today's environment, which could not necessarily be anticipated, as you correctly said, what is a business model now involving the horses at that location or similar location that is a sustainable, profitable business model?
Lee, I mean, that's a difficult question to answer when the economy sucks as much as it does, right?
Well, the one saving grace that we may have is that we're in a wonderful location. We're right in the edge of the wine country. We're 12 miles from the town of Sonoma. Sonoma has thousands and thousands of visitors all year long. And once, not to demonize or degrade the wine industry, but once you've been to a couple of wineries and you've learned how they make wine and been through all the rooms and the vats and all that, people want to see something else. So we get, on average, 3 to 4 calls for people to come and visit our horses. We also have the very nice spas and hotels that cater to visitors. And our plan, if we can stay here, is to produce brochures. I've talked to the concierges of many of these establishments, and they're more than willing to send visitors here. And once they come to the wine country as a family, they want to do something for their children that the children will enjoy. So it's a perfect win-win situation. I can see us growing immeasurably. The only difficulty that we would have is right now we are set up for good weather tours. If we had a little facility where we could entertain the public and host the tours all year round, we would be absolutely perfect. We would have a very sustainable income stream.
Yeah, you mentioned Sonoma County. In my experience, the problem with trying to bank on people coming after having done a couple of tours of wineries in Sonoma County is that they're too loaded to do anything else. Maybe that's just me. Roy, you're a foreclosure expert. Without speaking to the particulars of this case, because I know there are a lot of questions that you'd need answered. I mean, how does one get out of this? You must see this all the time, where people have been short sold. Now the business that they used to rely on has fallen out. The bottom's fallen out of it. In general terms, what can people do?
Well, Josh, first of all, I want to thank you for addressing this particular issue today and giving it a human face. The short sale route and the short sale process is something that's come about because the banks have recognized that systemically the foreclosure route is probably their least likely route for success. When banks foreclose on people's properties, not only do the neighbors' properties suffer, but the banks are horrible, horrible neighbors themselves. They themselves frequently aren't paying the homeowner association dues. They're not cleaning their pools. They're not maintaining their gardens and basically allowing their homes to become into disrepair and drag down the property values of entire neighborhoods. So then you have a situation like Lee where she proactively decided to go through a short sale process and then entered into a lease with the folks who purchased the property from her. And now there seems to be a dispute of whether or not they are being honorable and honoring their lease and allowing this important organization to continue to serve the public. And I will add that the equine crisis is not just in California, but really is throughout the United States. We know here in Florida in particular, horses are being literally sent to the slaughterhouse because there is more value to a horse that is dead and is turned into horse meat on the streets in Miami, all illegal, of course, than there is for a horse to be maintained by someone. And it's a crisis that we probably haven't seen since the Great Depression. We probably haven't seen this since the days of the Dust Bowl. This is something that's unheard of in my lifetime. It's unconscionable, and it's a systemic problem that I put at the foot of Wall Street. Now, I know that is not what we're here to talk about today, but I hope, Josh, that in the weeks and months to come, we'll be able to delve further and further into how we got into this crisis in the first place.
Well, that's certainly something that's an ongoing topic of discussion here at HuffPost Live, and we're doing lots and lots of conversations about that. I mean, one conversation that I had recently with John Cusack, actually the actor, is something that he's putting forward. A friend of his has this proposal to use eminent domain to try to reclaim properties that are underwater. Obviously, that doesn't apply in a case like this where the property has already been short sold. But can you think of any other innovative or interesting ways that people can deal with this? I mean, if you were a dictator for a day, what would you do to try to solve the crisis?
That's a wonderful question. If I was a benevolent dictator, I would want to make sure that the judges, in fact, throughout this country would apply the law equally, both to the large banking institutions as well as to the individuals who appear before them, usually without counsel. One of the things that we saw in the robo-signing crisis and the $25 billion settlement that the attorney generals had entered into is that to a large extent, we saw two sets of laws. One set of laws for the people who control the gold, meaning the banks and Wall Street, and a set of rules and laws that the rest of us had to follow. If I was a benevolent dictator and I was king for a day, I would make sure that the playing field was level and that every law applied to everyone equally. The idea that certain people go to jail for stealing a container of milk from a 7-Eleven, and yet someone can walk into a bank and steal billions and billions of dollars by cheating on LIBOR rates or by cheating on the way they sold securitized trusts to teachers and policemen around the world for their pensions, and to allow them to walk free, yet have someone who stole that container of milk be treated differently, I find to be ironically and systemically unfair.
Oh, I mean, it's a complete moral outrage, but it doesn't actually. But feeling that outrage doesn't help the people like Lee who are in the situation that they're in now. Is there any?
And so, I mean, the first and foremost thing, if we can go back to Lee's situation, I probably would, and I'm not a California lawyer, but certainly here in Florida, we would wanted to have considered defending that foreclosure and looking for every single possible thing that the banks did wrong in handling that loan. And you would be shocked how frequently we find things that are just wrong. And because they're wrong, they may not even have the right to be in court. And if they don't have the right to be in court, then they don't have the right to foreclose. And so this is what I'm talking about. And until recently, the courts just refused to acknowledge the possibility that the banks did not handle their paper properly, that the paper is in fact not properly transferable, that the transfers were done through fraud, that the transfers were done through plagiarism, that the transfers were done by people signing affidavits that were illegal, the transfers were done by notaries who weren't notaries. I mean, I can go on. The list is just unbelievable. We've seen it all here. And I will say that at least in Florida, we have finally seen a situation where the judges now recognize that they may have been sold a bill of goods as judges and that they were believing the stuff that the banks were bringing to them, because it was inconceivable to them that these venerable institutions on Wall Street and their lawyers could possibly have pulled the wool over them time and time and time again. And so what we're now seeing, at least in some cases, is the courts are starting to take a real look at the foreclosures and determine if they're being done properly and fairly. And so in Lee's case...
Sorry, go on.
And so in Lee's case, and again, I haven't seen any of the documentation, so I don't want to second guess this, but a short sale is a great process to get out and extricate yourself if, in fact, you're going to be facing a deficiency. But remember, most people in California, if it's their primary residence, aren't facing a deficiency because you're in a state that is a non-judicial foreclosure state. So in those states, you have nothing to lose to fight. In other states where you are a judicial foreclosure state, because you do have the judges, and if you do fight, you could end up suffering from a deficiency, but in most cases that doesn't happen anyway.
Lee, it must be heartbreaking to hear that the equine industry in Florida is actually selling horses to turn into meat because they're more valuable that way than actually keeping them. That must be inconceivable for you. But what's Plan B? What's the next step?
Well, in that particular situation where horses are being sold to slaughter is not just. It's not just Florida. I've heard of it in many, many, many cases. And it's a considerable plight of the Mustangs as well. They're being gathered and they magically disappear. It's really heartbreaking. Our rent lords have said that if we want to purchase the property back, we can pay them $500,000 and they will walk away. Now, it's really hard to even raise $100 in this particular climate, much less $500,000. But speaking to the legal issue, if I might say, I wrote a letter to Phil Angelides, who was President Obama's chair of the banking institution and discovering what was going wrong and what was going on. I wrote him a considerably long letter, and I detailed absolutely everything because I feel, as one of our guests said, that there were some inconsistencies and some areas were definitely problematic. And I got a letter back from his secretary. He wouldn't even look at it. So, where do you go from there?
But Nelson, to be fair to the administration, can you imagine how many letters they get from people who have been foreclosed on, for people who have had to short sell their properties, from people who are underwater? This is a massive, massive crisis. This is an epidemic. As you said before, this is something that we haven't seen since the Great Depression or the Dust Bowl. Or was it Roy who said that? I can't remember. But what can you just get us out of this? What I really want to do is see whether our viewers and see whether the HuffPost Live community and the Huffington Post community can come up with any innovative solutions, can find a way to kind of crowdsource this, because I don't think this is something that's going to happen from the top down. This is going to have to be something that happens from the ground up.
And you're quite correct. Coming back to some of the business pieces underneath all of this, and yes, there is an unfortunate and sad epidemic touching communities all across the country as it regards foreclosures. Now, Lee is sitting there right now with live walking assets walking around the horses, and some customers coming in. So let's talk about the business solutions very quickly. You talked, Lee, earlier about this being for children and underprivileged and disabled people. You can consider forming a 501c3 non-tax charity to be able to raise money on the basis of supplying this wonderful service to underprivileged and children and disabled. That's one approach that may help you in the business world. On the crowdsourcing side, crowdsourcing is a growing influence when it comes to raising money. And if it comes in increments of $1,000 or $10,000 or $1, you have such an empathetic cause working with the people and constituents that we mentioned earlier that there's probably a number of people, maybe even closer than you think, who can come forward to support the financial piece. But remember, please remember, that behind it all has to be the business to keep you healthy for the next number of years. You mentioned being in Sonoma and talking about the hotels and so forth and so on. Remember that these people can be like your agents. They can send people to you, and do understand that as an agent, you might be kind enough to send them a little 10% of what they send you. Those are the kinds of things that will help you build business relationships with those people so that the crowds keep on coming as you begin to rebuild the business. But yes, you have to get past that foreclosure piece first.
Right. Well, it's not, this is a family corporation that has the power of life and death over us. We have explored the 501s, and there is just no time. The only way would be if we could umbrella under a particular situation, under another rescue organization or whatever. I have explored that extensively. Most of the rescue organizations that I have contacted, which have been numerous, are so up to here in terms of their own difficulties that they don't want to take on anyone else.
Lee, we're gonna stay in touch with you. I want to make sure that we get as many comments and we get as many emails. I want everyone out there to let us know what thoughts they have for you guys and how you guys can pull yourselves out of it. Thank you for putting a human face to this. Nelson, Roy, thanks so much for your contribution. We'll keep you looped in, and we'll keep you both in touch. Let us know what you think about this. As I said, leave comments, and I really want to get as many ideas as we possibly can. So stay in this conversation. It doesn't end just because this segment does. You're watching HuffPost Live.